Power is usually measured in net worth, stock options, and the corner office on the 45th floor. But sometimes, true power hides behind a stained apron and a name tag that nobody bothers to read. Adrian Preece was the kind of man who could collapse a foreign economy with a single phone call. Yet he found himself outsmarted in a way he never deemed possible. He thought the woman refilling his water glass was invisible, a part of the furniture. He was wrong. One math equation, scribbled on the back of a dinner receipt, was about to cost him his pride, but it might just save his life. This is the story of the waitress who knew too much. The Obsidian Room was the kind of establishment where the lighting was kept intentionally dim, not for romance, but to obscure the sheer excess of wealth gathered at the tables. Here, a bottle of wine cost more than a mid-sized sedan, and the clientele spoke in a language of mergers, acquisitions, and hostile takeovers. Erin Corves adjusted the waistband of her black slacks, which had grown loose over the last 3 months of skipping meals to pay rent. She balanced a heavy tray of untouched appetizers on her left shoulder, navigating the labyrinth of velvet booths with the practiced grace of a dancer. In her mind, however, she wasn't counting tables. She was counting the probability vectors of the waiter ahead of her dropping his tray based on his uneven gait. He's favoring his right ankle. 70% chance of a spill within 10 minutes, she calculated silently. Erin, table 4 requires a decant on the 988 Bordeaux. Move it, hissed Gareth, the floor manager. Gareth was a man who believed his position as manager of a high-end Chicago steakhouse made him equivalent to a deity. Erin didn't make eye contact. Yes, Gareth. Right away. She moved toward table 4, the prime spot in the center of the room. It was occupied by 2 men who radiated the kind of aggressive confidence that sucked the air out of the room. Facing the door was Adrian Preece. Everyone in Chicago, perhaps everyone in the financial world, knew Adrian Preece. He was the CEO of Preece Kensington Capital, a hedge fund that didn't just predict the market, it seemed to dictate it. He was 34, possessed a jawline that looked carved from granite, and had eyes the color of cold steel. Tonight, those eyes were narrowed in frustration. Sitting across from him was Simon Halloway, his chief financial officer, a man who sweated profusely regardless of the ambient temperature. Erin approached the table, her presence practiced in its invisibility. She was a ghost in a waistcoat. As she began the delicate process of uncorking the vintage Bordeaux, the conversation between the 2 men grew louder. The logic is sound, Adrian, Simon argued, wiping his forehead with a linen napkin. The algorithm holds up. If we leverage the Viridian buyout against the Asian tech sector's volatility, we trigger a cascade. The profit margin is projected at 12% within the first quarter. Adrian slammed his hand down on the leather table, causing the silverware to jump. Erin didn't flinch. She continued to pour, her hand steady as a surgeon's. 12% is a fantasy, Simon, Adrian snapped, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. You're relying on the standard Black-Scholes model for the pricing derivatives. But you're ignoring the fat tail risk. The market isn't a bell curve anymore. It's chaotic. If the yen fluctuates by even 0.5%, the leverage collapses. We don't just lose the profit, we lose the principal. I need a guarantee, not a gamble. There is no mathematical way to guarantee safety against that kind of stochastic volatility, Simon pleaded. We've had the quants at MIT run the numbers for 3 weeks. The variable you're asking for, it doesn't exist. You're looking for a ghost in the machine. Adrian rubbed his temples, looking exhausted. Then find new quants. If we sign the Viridian deal on Monday without hedging that risk, Preece Kensington is exposed to a $3 billion liability. I won't sign it, Simon. I won't. Erin finished pouring the wine. The red liquid swirled in the crystal glass, settling perfectly at the widest point of the bowl. She should have walked away. She should have retreated to the safety of the kitchen, collected her tips, and gone home to her studio apartment with the leaky faucet. But her brain didn't work like that. It never had. As she placed the bottle down, her eyes drifted to the open notebook next to Adrian's plate. It was filled with messy calculus, partial differential equations attempting to map out the risk curve of the merger. She saw the error instantly. It glared at her like a neon sign in a dark alley. It was a fundamental mistake in the integration of the time decay factor. They were treating time as linear relative to market volatility, but in high-frequency trading, time was relative to volume. Erin bit her lip. Walk away, Erin. You aren't that person anymore. You're just a waitress. Is there a problem? Adrian's voice cut through her thoughts. Erin blinked, realizing she had been staring at his notebook for 5 seconds too long. Adrian was looking up at her, his expression a mix of annoyance and amusement. He saw a waitress hovering, likely hoping for a bigger tip. No, sir, Erin said, her voice soft. Enjoy the wine. She turned to leave. Wait, Adrian said. It wasn't a request. Erin froze and turned back. Adrian picked up his glass, swirling the wine, but his eyes were locked on her face. You were reading the notes. Do you find corporate risk assessment fascinating? Or were you just checking if I have good handwriting? Simon snorted into his drink. Adrian, leave the poor girl alone. She's probably wondering why we haven't ordered the lobster yet. The condescension in Simon's voice triggered something dormant in Erin. It was a spark of the old fire, the fire that had burned bright before the scandal, before her father's imprisonment, before she had to change her name and bury her degree. Erin looked at Simon, then back to Adrian. I wasn't looking at your handwriting, she said, her tone shifting from subservient to factual. I was looking at the integral on the 3rd line. It's wrong. Silence descended on table 4. It was heavy and absolute. Adrian put his glass down slowly. A slow, mocking smile spread across his lips. Excuse me? The integral, Erin said, gesturing vaguely to the notebook. You're applying a Gaussian function to a fractal market distribution. It's going to flatten your risk curve artificially. Simon is right that the Black-Scholes model doesn't work, but you're wrong about why. It's not a fat tail issue. It's a feedback loop. You're missing the recursive term. Simon laughed, a loud, barking sound. This is rich. Adrian, the waitress, is giving us financial advice. Did you hear that? The recursive term. She probably heard that on a podcast. Adrian didn't laugh. He stared at Erin, his eyes narrowing. He was a predator sensing something unusual in his territory. And tell me, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, what would a waitress at the Obsidian Room suggest as the correct variable? Should we consult the dessert menu? Erin felt the heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from anger. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a cheap ballpoint pen, and looked at the pristine white receipt lying on the table tray. May I? She asked. Adrian gestured to the paper, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed. Entertain me. This dinner was getting boring anyway. Erin took the receipt. She flipped it over to the blank side. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look up. Her hand moved across the paper with a terrifying speed. Frax partial, vers partial, to pause frac 1 power 2 sigma turn to was 2 on frac partial 2 vers partial, stu psas frax partial, vers partial, so on star v plus a lambda, j, v, was or does. She wrote down the modified differential equation, adding a jump diffusion parameter denoted by lambda, us lambda dollar. But then she did something unorthodox. She integrated a feedback loop variable based on volume, something rarely taught outside of theoretical physics. Step 1. Isolate the volatility index. Step 2. Apply the recursive filter. Step 3. Solve for zero-risk parity. It took her 45 seconds. She clicked the pen shut and slid the paper across the mahogany table toward Adrian. "You don't need new quants," Erin said quietly. "You just need to stop treating the market like it has memory. It doesn't. But the traders do. That's your missing variable. The human element expressed as a function of volume." She placed the pen down. "I'll go get the manager to take your order." Erin turned and walked away, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen Adrian Preece pick up the receipt. She would have seen the smirk vanish from his face, replaced by a look of absolute, unadulterated shock. Adrian stared at the paper. The background noise of the restaurant, the clatter of silverware, the murmur of conversation faded into a dull hum. He wasn't looking at a waitress's doodle. He was looking at a solution to a problem that had plagued his firm for 6 months. The math was elegant, almost artistic. It was aggressive, unorthodox, and it was correct. "What is it?" Simon asked, leaning over, squinting at the receipt. Did she draw a smiley face? "Shut up, Simon," Adrian murmured, his eyes scanning the derivation. "Adrian, seriously, toss it. It's gibberish. She's probably some undergrad student trying to show off." "It's not gibberish," Adrian said, his voice tight. He pointed to the third line of her equation. "Look at this." She used a stochastic volatility jump. She corrected for the leverage effect by inverting the time parameter. "Simon, this balances. This actually balances." Simon frowned, pulling his glasses from his pocket. He looked at the receipt, his eyes widening. That shouldn't work. You can't just add a lambda variable there. That violates the efficient market hypothesis." "The market isn't efficient," Adrian snapped. "That's the point. She saw what we didn't. She didn't solve for the money, she solved for the behavior." Adrian stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He looked around the dimly lit dining room, scanning the sea of black and white uniforms. "Where did she go?" "Adrian, sit down," Simon hissed, looking around nervously. "People are watching." "I don't care," Adrian said. He grabbed the receipt, folding it carefully, and placing it in his breast pocket as if it were a winning lottery ticket. "I need to talk to her." He raised his hand, signaling Gareth, the manager. Gareth rushed over, his smile oily and obsequious. "Mr. Preece, is everything satisfactory? I can have the chef prepare the wagyu immediately." "The waitress," Adrian interrupted, "the one who poured the wine. Who is she?" Gareth's face fell. He assumed Erin had made a mistake. "I apologize profusely, sir." "Did she spill something? Was she rude? She is a temporary hire, very unreliable. I can have her terminated immediately if she caused offense." "No," Adrian said, his voice cold. "I asked you who she is. Her name is Erin Corves." "Bring her here." Gareth looked uncomfortable. "I'm afraid she just clocked out, sir. She said she wasn't feeling well. Ran out the back door about 2 minutes ago." Adrian cursed under his breath. He threw a stack of $100 bills onto the table, far more than the cost of the wine. "Simon, pay the rest. I'm going." "Going where? We have the board meeting prep." "The prep is done," Adrian said, tapping his chest pocket. "We have the formula. Now, I need the architect." Outside, the Chicago wind was biting. Erin pulled her thin coat tighter around her shoulders as she hurried down the alleyway behind the obsidian room. She was shaking, Stupid, 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 she chastised herself. You exposed yourself. You showed off. She had spent 3 years building this anonymity. After her father, Robert Mercer, had been framed for the embezzlement scheme at Zephyr Tech, the name Mercer was poison. She had changed it to Corves, her mother's maiden name, and fled Boston. She had abandoned her PhD at MIT just months before defending her dissertation. If people found out she was Robert Mercer's daughter, the media circus would start again. Or worse, the people who framed her father, dangerous, powerful people, would come looking for the daughter who knew where the real ledgers were hidden. She turned the corner onto the main street, hoping to catch the late bus. "Hey!" a deep voice echoed from the mouth of the alley. Erin froze. She didn't turn around, she just started walking faster. "Erin, wait!" She recognized the voice. It was him, the billionaire. She broke into a run. "Stop!" Footsteps pounded behind her, heavy and fast. She wasn't an athlete. She was a mathematician who survived on coffee and ramen. She made it half a block before a hand firmly grasped her arm, spinning her around. She gasped, pulling back, her eyes wide with fear. Adrian Preece stood there, slightly out of breath, his tie crooked. He didn't look like a billionaire in that moment. He looked desperate. "Let me go," Erin said, her voice trembling. "I didn't steal anything. Check my pockets." Adrian let go of her arm instantly, holding his hands up in a gesture of peace. "I know you didn't steal anything. You gave me something." He pulled the crumpled receipt from his pocket. Under the street lamp, the ink looked stark and black. "Where did you learn this?" Adrian demanded. "This is doctoral-level mathematics. No, it's beyond that. This is theoretical algorithmic design. Who are you?" "I'm a waitress," Erin said, backing away. I read a lot. It was a lucky guess." Adrian laughed, a dry, incredulous sound. "A lucky guess? You integrated a feedback loop into a partial differential equation by memory. That's not a guess. That's genius. And it's wasted on pouring wine for idiots like Simon." "It pays the rent," Erin said defensively. "Does it?" Adrian stepped closer. The intensity in his eyes was hypnotic. "I can offer you a job. Right now. Tonight. Preece Kensington needs a lead analyst. Starting salary is $200,000, plus bonuses." Erin felt the temptation wash over her like a warm wave. 200,000. She could hire a real lawyer for her father. She could move out of the rat-infested studio. She could buy winter boots that didn't leak. But she couldn't. "I can't," she whispered. "Why not?" Adrian pressed. "You clearly hate serving. I saw your face. You're bored. You're smarter than every person in that room combined, including me. Why are you hiding, Erin?" The question hung in the air. "Why are you hiding?" "I'm not interested," she lied. "Please leave me alone." She turned to walk away again, but Adrian's next words stopped her cold. "It's the Mercer logic, isn't it?" Erin's blood turned to ice. She stopped dead. "I recognized the style," Adrian said, quietly to her back. "Robert Mercer, the disgraced genius of Zephyr Tech. He was the only one who used that specific lambda notation for jump diffusion. He taught it to his students at MIT before he was arrested." Adrian walked around her until he was facing her again. He looked at her searching face, the panic in her eyes. "You're not just a student of his, are you?" Adrian asked softly. "You look just like him." Erin's breath hitched. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I think I do. You're Erin Mercer, the daughter who vanished." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Her cover was blown. In less than 10 minutes, this man had deconstructed her identity just as easily as she had deconstructed his math problem. "If you know who I am," Erin said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Then you know no one will hire me. My name is toxic. My father stole millions." "He was convicted of stealing millions," Adrian corrected. "There's a difference." Erin looked up at him sharply. "What does that mean?" Adrian looked around the empty street, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I never believed the Zephyr case. The math didn't add up. Robert Mercer was a man of logic, and the embezzlement was sloppy, illogical. It looked planted." Erin felt a lump form in her throat. For 3 years, everyone had spat on her father's name. This was the first time someone powerful had questioned the narrative. "Why do you care?" she asked. "Because," Adrian said, his gaze intense, "the man who took over Zephyr Tech after your father went to prison is the same man trying to block my merger on Monday. Marcus Vane." The name sent a shiver down Erin's spine. Marcus Vane, the man who had been her father's partner, the man she suspected had framed him. "Vane is destroying the market," Adrian continued. "He's using an algorithm that is destabilizing the entire sector. I'm trying to stop him, but I couldn't figure out his code. Until tonight." He held up the receipt. "Until you wrote this." Erin looked at the paper. "That formula? It counters Vane's model?" "It predicts it," Adrian said. "And if we can predict it, we can break it." He extended a hand toward her. "I don't care about your name, Erin. I don't care about the scandal. I need your mind. Come work for me. Help me take down Marcus Vane, and maybe, just maybe, we can find the proof to clear your father." Erin looked at his hand. It was a lifeline. It was also a trap. If she stepped back into this world, Vane would know. She would be a target again. But the thought of her father, rotting in a cell for a crime he didn't commit, outweighed the fear. She took a deep breath, the cold Chicago air filling her lungs. "Double the salary," she said. Adrian smirked. "Done. And I don't wear a uniform. You can wear pajamas for all I care, as long as the math is right." Erin reached out and shook his hand. His grip was warm and firm. "One condition, Adrian," she said, using his first name for the first time. "If we do this, we do it my way. Vane isn't just a businessman. He's dangerous. If he finds out I'm helping you, he won't just sue us." "Let him try," Adrian said, a dark look crossing his face. "He's never dealt with a priest and a Mercer together." Just then, a black SUV rolled slowly down the street, slowing as it passed them. The windows were tinted pitch black. Erin instinctively stepped behind Adrian. The car lingered for a second, then sped up, disappearing into the night. "Was that him?" Erin whispered. "No," Adrian said, his jaw tightening. "That was just the beginning." The lobby of Priest Kensington Capitol was a cathedral of glass and steel, designed to make anyone earning less than 7 figures feel insignificant. Monday morning arrived with a grey, relentless drizzle, but inside the tower, the air was conditioned to a crisp, sterile perfection. Erin walked through the revolving doors, clutching a temporary security badge Adrian had texted to her phone. She wore her best outfit, a charcoal pencil skirt, and a white blouse that she had ironed 3 times that morning, but compared to the Italian suits and designer heels clicking across the marble floor, she felt like an imposter. "You must be the waitress," a voice sneered. Erin turned to see Simon Halloway waiting by the elevator bank. He looked even sweatier than he had at the restaurant, his eyes darting around, as if checking for eavesdroppers. "My name is Erin," she corrected, stepping into the elevator with him. She pressed the button for the top floor. "Look, I don't know what kind of game you're playing with, Adrian," Simon hissed, as the door slid shut, sealing them in the silver box. "He's vulnerable right now. The merger has him stressed. If you're here to extract some kind of settlement or play the long-lost genius card, I will bury you. I have lawyers who are sharks, Erin. They eat little fish like you for breakfast." Erin watched the floor numbers climb. 30, 31, 32. "Simon," she said calmly, not looking at him. "According to the receipt I corrected last night, your risk assessment for the Viridian deal was off by a factor of 4. If Adrian had signed that deal based on your math, this firm would be insolvent by Wednesday. I'm not the shark you need to worry about. You should worry about your own incompetence." Simon's face turned a mottled shade of red. He opened his mouth to retort, but the elevator dinged, and the doors opened to the penthouse suite. Adrian was standing right there, pacing, a phone pressed to his ear. He looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was loosened, and his sleeves were rolled up. "I don't care what the board thinks. Tell them I'm vetting a new variable," Adrian barked into the phone, then hung up. He looked at Simon, then at Erin. His expression softened imperceptibly. "You came," Adrian said. "I needed the money," Erin replied, keeping her guard up. "Come with me." Adrian ignored Simon completely and led Erin into his office. It was a sprawling room, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. But what caught Erin's eye wasn't the view. It was the whiteboard. It was covered in red ink. Adrian had spent the night trying to expand on her napkin theorem. "I tried to run the simulation based on your lambda variable," Adrian said, handing her a marker. "It works for the currency markets, but when I apply it to Vane's tech holding, it breaks." "Why?" Erin dropped her bag on a velvet armchair and walked to the board. She didn't hesitate. She was in her element now. The shyness of the waitress evaporated, replaced by the authority of the mathematician. "It breaks because you're assuming Vane is trading rationally," Erin said, capping the red marker and picking up a blue one. "Vane isn't trading for profit anymore. He's trading for suppression. Look at the volume spikes at 3 Orgs AM. She circled a cluster of data points. "He's dumping stock in his own shell companies to artificially lower the sector average," she explained, drawing a line connecting the points. "It's a short ladder attack, but sophisticated. He's masking it as algorithmic error. He's driving the price down so he can buy back the Viridian shares for pennies on the dollar before you merge." Adrian stared at the board, his mind racing. "He's tanking the value on purpose? That's market manipulation. That's illegal." "It's only illegal if you can prove intent," Erin said. "And right now, his algorithm looks like random noise. We need to find the signal in the noise. We need to find the key." "The key?" "Every algorithm has a seed," Erin said, turning to face him. "A constant number that initiates the sequence. If Vane is as arrogant as I remember, his seed will be personal, a date, a coordinate, something that matters to him." Adrian walked over to his desk and tapped a button on the intercom. "Sarah, cancel my meetings, all of them, and get coffee, a lot of it." For the next 14 hours, the Billionaire and the Waitress existed in a bubble of pure intellect. They worked side by side, ordering takeout that went cold as they argued over differential equations and code. Erin watched Adrian work. He wasn't just a suit. He was brilliant. He kept up with her, challenging her theories, pushing her to be faster. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel like a fugitive. She felt respected. And Adrian watched her. He saw the way she chewed on the end of her stylus when she was thinking. He saw the fire in her eyes when she solved a complex knot in the data. He realized that the woman he had ignored for months at the restaurant was the most formidable person he had ever met. By midnight, the office was silent. The city lights twinkled below them like a carpet of diamonds. "We're close," Erin whispered, rubbing her tired eyes. "I've isolated the pattern. Vane's trades execute every time the volatility index hits a specific prime number ratio. He's using primes? Adrian asked, leaning over her shoulder. He was close. Too close. Erin could smell his cologne, sandalwood and expensive scotch. It's an encryption method, Erin said, her voice slightly breathless. But to crack it, we need the source code. We can't derive it from the outside. We need access to his private server. Adrian pulled back, sighing. He walked to the window. His private server is air-gapped. It's not connected to the internet. It's located in his penthouse office. We'd need physical access. So we're stuck, Erin said, slumped in her chair. Not necessarily. Adrian turned, a dangerous glint in his eye. Marcus Vane is hosting the Gilded Age charity gala tomorrow night. It's at the Pierre Hotel. Everyone who is anyone will be there. So, Adrian walked back to her. Vane is paranoid. He carries a biometric authentication key, a heavy black card, in his jacket pocket at all times. It links to his server. If we can get close enough to him with a near-field cloner, we can copy the digital signature. Then we can access his server remotely. Erin shook her head. That sounds like a spy movie. And I'm not a spy. I'm a waitress who likes math. You're not a waitress anymore, Erin, Adrian said softly. You're the only person who can stop him. I can get us into the gala, but I need a partner. I need someone who can distract him while I get the clone. Distract him? Erin laughed nervously. How? By explaining calculus? Adrian smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. No. By being the most stunning woman in the room. Vane has a weakness for beauty. He won't be looking at your math. He'll be looking at you. And while he's distracted, I'll get the key. Erin looked down at her simple skirt. I don't have anything to wear to a gala, Adrian. Adrian picked up his phone. That is the one variable I can easily solve. The Pierre Hotel ballroom was a sea of gold leaf, crystal chandeliers, and old money. A string quartet played softly in the corner, barely audible over the hum of polite, deadly conversation. When Adrian Preece entered the room, heads turned. He was tuxedoed perfection, radiating power. But the silence that rippled through the crowd wasn't for him. It was for the woman on his arm. Erin felt like she was walking on a tightrope. The dress Adrian's team had procured for her was a weapon in silk, an emerald green gown that clung to her curves and cascaded to the floor in a liquid shimmer. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was styled in loose, glamorous waves over one shoulder. She wore a diamond necklace that likely cost more than the entire restaurant she worked at. Breathe, Adrian whispered, his hand warm and steady on the small of her back. You look incredible. Just stay close to me. I feel like I'm wearing a disguise, Erin whispered back, clutching her clutch purse tightly. Inside the purse was a small, high-tech device that looked like a compact mirror, the near-field cloner. Everyone here is wearing a disguise, Erin. Theirs is just moral. Yours is textile. They navigated the room. Erin felt the eyes on her, judgmental, curious, envious. She heard the whispers. Who is she? Is that Preece's new conquest? She looks familiar. There he is, Adrian murmured. Erin followed his gaze. Standing near the ice sculpture was Marcus Vane. He was an older man, in his late 50s, with silver hair and a face that would have been handsome if not for the cruel set of his mouth. He was holding court, surrounded by sycophants laughing too hard at his jokes. Erin felt a surge of nausea. This was the man who had ruined her father, the man who had come to their house for dinner when she was a child, smiling while he plotted their destruction. Ready? Adrian asked. No, Erin said. But let's do it. They approached the circle. Vane saw Adrian and his smile tightened into a thin line. "Adrian," Vane said, his voice smooth as oil. "I didn't think you'd show your face. I heard the Viridian deal is complicating." "Business as usual, Marcus," Adrian replied smoothly. "I'd like to introduce you to my associate, Erin." Vane turned his gaze to Erin. For a second, his eyes narrowed. He scanned her face, looking for recognition. Erin held her breath, forcing a polite smile. If he recognized the structure of her cheekbones, the shape of her eyes, traits she shared with Robert Mercer, it was over. "Erin," Vane said, taking her hand. His skin was cold. "I don't believe we've met. You seem familiar." "I have one of those faces," Erin said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It's a pleasure, Mr. Vane. Adrian speaks of you often." "Does he?" Vane chuckled darkly. "Nothing good, I assume." "He says you're a man who understands the value of variables," Erin said. "I find that fascinating." Vane's eyebrows raised. "A beauty with a brain. Adrian, you've outdone yourself." He stepped closer to Erin, ignoring Adrian. "And what do you do, Erin?" "I'm in risk management," she said. "Are you?" Vane smirked. "Then you should know that being seen with Adrian Priest is a high-risk activity." "I like high stakes," Erin countered. Vane laughed, delighted. "I like her. Adrian, why don't you get us some drinks? I'd like to get to know your associate better." This was the opening. Adrian nodded stiffly. "I'll be right back." As Adrian walked away, Erin knew the plan had changed. Originally, Adrian was supposed to bump into Vane to get the clone, but Vane had isolated her. She had the device in her purse. She had to do it. "So, Erin," Vane said, stepping into her personal space. "Tell me, where did Adrian find you? You don't look like the usual debutantes he parades around." "I'm not a debutante," Erin said. She shifted her purse, moving it closer to his jacket pocket. The device needed to be within 4 inches for 10 seconds. "No, you have hunger in your eyes," Vane observed. "I recognize it. I had it once." He reached out and touched the diamond necklace at her throat. His fingers lingered. It was invasive and creepy. Erin wanted to slap his hand away, but she forced herself to stand still. 1 second. 2 seconds. "You know," Vane whispered, leaning in. "Adrian is going to lose everything on Monday. You seem smart. Why go down with the ship?" 3 seconds. 4 seconds. "Maybe I think the ship can be saved," Erin said, maintaining eye contact. "Naive," Vane sneered. "There is no saving it. The math is inevitable." 5 seconds. "Is it?" Erin challenged. "Or is the game rigged?" Vane froze, his eyes bored into hers. "What did you say?" 6 seconds. "Everyone says the market is efficient," Erin improvised, her heart pounding against her ribs. "But we both know chaos can be manufactured." Vane's grip on her arm tightened. "You sound remarkably like an old friend of mine, a friend who is currently enjoying state hospitality." 7 seconds. 8 seconds. The device in her purse vibrated silently. Acquiring signal. "You're hurting me, Marcus," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Who are you?" Vane hissed. 9 seconds. 10 seconds. Complete. "Erin!" Adrian's voice cut through the tension. He appeared at Vane's elbow, holding 2 glasses of champagne. His eyes flicked to Vane's hand on Erin's arm, and his jaw clenched. "I think you've monopolized her enough, Marcus. The waltz is starting." Adrian practically ripped Erin away from Vane. Vane stood there, suspicious, watching them go. Adrian guided her onto the dance floor, pulling her close. "Did you get it?" he whispered into her ear. "I think so," Erin breathed, her legs shaking. "He suspects, Adrian. He mentioned my father. Not by name, but he knows." "We're leaving. Now," Adrian said. They did one turn on the dance floor to blend in, then moved toward the exit. But as they reached the grand doors, a large man with an earpiece stepped in their path. It was Vane's head of security. "Mr. Vane would like a word with the young lady before you leave," the guard rumbled. Adrian stepped in front of Erin. "She's with me, and we're leaving. Mr. Vane insists." The guard reached for Erin. Adrian didn't hesitate. He wasn't a street fighter, but he had boxed at Oxford. He drove a sharp, short jab into the guard's solar plexus. The man doubled over, gasping. "Run!" Adrian commanded. He grabbed Erin's hand, and they sprinted out of the ballroom, past the shocked valet, and into Adrian's waiting limousine. "Go!" Adrian yelled to the driver. "Just drive!" As the car peeled away, Erin collapsed back against the leather seat, the adrenaline crashing out of her system. She was shaking uncontrollably. Adrian turned to her, his face full of concern. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" I'm fine," Erin stammered. She fumbled with her purse, pulling out the compact mirror device. A small green light was blinking. "We got it," she said, a hysterical laugh bubbling up. "We have the key." Adrian looked at the device, then at her. The intensity of the moment, the danger, the shared victory. It broke the dam. He reached out, cupping her face with his hands. "You were magnificent. You were absolutely brilliant." He kissed her. It wasn't a polite, tentative kiss. It was desperate and fierce, born of adrenaline and the magnetic pull that had been building between them for 24 hours. Erin froze for a split second. Then she melted into it. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer. For a moment, there was no Marcus Vane, no prison sentence, no mouth. Just the heat of him. But as the car turned a corner, reality intruded. Erin pulled back, breathless. "We have to go to the office," she whispered. "We have to run the code." Adrian rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "Right. The code." He pulled away, straightening his tie, but his hand found hers and squeezed it tight. "After this is over, Erin, we need to talk about variables. Specifically, us." "First we survive," Erin said, clutching the device. But as they sped toward the Priest Kensington Tower, neither of them noticed the small black sedan trailing them at a distance. And they certainly didn't know that inside the tower, Simon Halloway was sitting at Adrian's computer, watching a progress bar reach 100%. The upload was complete. But it wasn't the data they wanted. It was the data Vane wanted them to find. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt like an ascent to the gallows. The silence was thick, punctuated only by the hum of the machinery and the erratic beating of Erin's heart. Adrian stood rigid, checking his watch every 10 seconds. 3 a.m., he muttered. "The Asian markets are closing. The European pre-market opens in an hour. Vane will execute the final phase of the short ladder then. We have 60 minutes to inject the kill code." The doors slid open with a soft chime. The office was not empty. Sitting in Adrian's leather chair, illuminated by the ghostly blue glow of the monitors, was Simon Halloway. He was spinning a crystal tumbler of Adrian's best scotch in his hand. He didn't look nervous anymore. He looked smug. "You're late," Simon said, taking a slow sip. "I expected you back 20 minutes ago." "Traffic?" Adrian stepped forward, his face darkening. "Get out of my chair, Simon. We have work to do." "I'm afraid the work is done, Adrian," Simon replied, not moving. He gestured to the massive screens on the wall. They were flashing red. "I've authorized the transfer." Adrian froze. "What transfer?" "The liquidity transfer," Simon said, enjoying the moment. "I just signed over the Priest Kensington reserves to purchase the Viridian block at the current inflated price." You what?" Adrian's voice was a whisper of disbelief. "That's suicide. That will bankrupt the firm by sunrise." "Not the firm," Simon corrected. "Just you. You see, the board met electronically an hour ago. They voted to oust you for erratic behavior and reckless endangerment of assets. Guess who they appointed as interim CEO? Simon smiled, a wide, predatory grin. "Me." Erin stepped out from behind Adrian. "You didn't just do this for a promotion, Simon. You're working for Vane." Simon's eyes flicked to Erin. "Ah, the waitress. The variable I didn't account for. You're smarter than you look, honey, but you're too late. Marcus Vane offered me a seat at his table. A real seat. Not the scraps Adrian threw me for 5 years." "You traitor!" Adrian snarled, lunging forward. "Tut-tut," Simon said, pressing a key on the keyboard. "Security is already on their way up to escort you out. But before you go, Marcus wanted you to see this." The large center screen flickered and changed. It was a live video feed. Marcus Vane was sitting in his own office, still wearing his tuxedo from the gala. He looked fresh, victorious, and utterly cruel. "Good evening, Adrian." Vane's voice boomed through the surround sound speakers. "I trust Simon has delivered the news? Priest Kensington is now effectively a subsidiary of Vane Global, and I bought it with your own money." Adrian looked at the screen, his fists clenched so hard his knuckles were white. "You won't get away with this, Marcus. I have your key. I have the clone." Vane laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. "The clone? You think I let that girl get close to me without knowing? I wanted you to steal it. That device didn't download my data, Adrian. It uploaded a tracker. It gave me a direct back door into your mainframe. You walked a Trojan horse right into your own castle." Erin looked down at the compact mirror device in her hand. It felt heavy, like lead. She had been played. They had both been played. "It's over," Vane gloated. "And as for Ms. Mercer, yes, I know who you are. The police are also on their way. Corporate espionage, theft, fraud. You'll be sharing a cell block with your father by morning." Adrian turned to Erin. The look of devastation on his face broke her heart. He had trusted her plan, and it had led them into a trap. "I'm sorry," Adrian whispered to her. "Erin, I'm so sorry." Simon stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Security will be here in 2 minutes. If I were you, I'd run. Not that it will help." The room was suffocating. The red numbers on the screen were ticking down, signaling the total collapse of Adrian's fortune. The game was lost. Or was it? Erin stared at the screen. She stared at the red numbers. She stared at the complex algorithm Vane was using to drain the accounts. And then she started to laugh. It started as a low chuckle and grew into a full, bright laugh that echoed off the glass walls. Simon frowned. Hysteria. Sad. "No," Erin said, wiping a tear from her eye. She looked up, her expression shifting instantly from defeat to absolute, razor-sharp focus. She walked past Adrian, right up to the desk where Simon stood. "You boys and your egos," Erin said, shaking her head. "You always forget the basic rule of calculus." "And what is that?" Simon sneered. "Check your integration limits," Erin said. She slammed the compact mirror device onto the desk. It cracked open. It wasn't just a cloner. Inside, she had resoldered the chip. "You think I didn't know you were a mole, Simon?" Erin asked, her voice dropping to a cool, commanding tone. "Your math errors in the restaurant were too specific. You weren't incompetent. You were signaling. You were leaving breadcrumbs for Vane's algorithm to follow." Simon's smile faltered. "What are you talking about?" Erin turned to the camera, looking directly at Marcus Vane. "And you, Marcus, you think I'm just Robert Mercer's daughter? You think I'm just a student? I'm the one who corrected his proofs. I'm the one who wrote the code you stole from him. She grabbed the keyboard. Adrian, she shouted. Block the door. What? Adrian blinked, confused. Block the door. Buy me 2 minutes. Adrian didn't ask questions. He grabbed a heavy marble bust from the pedestal and jammed it under the door handles just as the security guards began to pound on the other side. Erin, what are you doing? Adrian yelled over the noise of the pounding. Erin's fingers flew across the keyboard. Vane used the tracker to open a two-way connection. He thinks it's a tunnel to drain us, but a tunnel goes both ways. On the screen, Vane's face suddenly lost its composure. He was looking at something on his own monitor. What is this? Why is the liquidity reversing? I'm initiating the Mercer inverse, Erin said through gritted teeth as she typed. You're trying to suck the capital out of Priest Kensington. I'm simply reversing the polarity of the flow. I'm using your own vacuum against you. Stop her! Simon screamed, lunging for the keyboard. Adrian tackled him. The two men crashed into the bookshelf, glass shattering everywhere. Simon was younger, but Adrian was fighting for his life. He landed a solid right hook, knocking Simon back into the wet bar. Hurry, Erin! Adrian gasped. Almost there, Erin muttered. On the screen, the red numbers turned green. No! Vane shouted on the video feed. Disconnect the server. Pull the plug. Too late, Erin whispered. She hit the enter key with a definitive slam. The effect was instantaneous. On the massive wall of monitors, the chaotic graphs flattened into a single straight line. Then they spiked. What did you do? Simon groaned from the floor, wiping blood from his lip. Erin spun the chair around to face the screen. I didn't just stop the transfer. I triggered a margin call on Vane's own positions. He was leveraged 50-1 to execute this takeover. When I reversed the flow, his collateral vanished. She pointed to the stock ticker. Vane Global was in free fall. It wasn't just dropping, it was disintegrating. He's being liquidated, Adrian said, standing up and straightening his torn suit. He looked at the screen in awe. The automated clearing houses are seizing his assets to cover the debt. He's losing everything. On the video feed, chaos had erupted in Vane's office. People were running around. Vane was screaming into a phone. You can't do this! Vane shrieked at the camera, his face purple with rage. This is theft. No, Marcus, Erin said calmly into the microphone. It's math. You divided by 0. The system is just correcting the error. Then, a new window popped up on the center screen. It was a file directory. And here is the bonus, Erin said softly. She clicked on a folder labeled Archive 99998 Zephyr. Files began to cascade down the screen. Emails, ledgers, voice recordings. These are the original files from Zephyr Tech, Erin said, her voice trembling slightly. The ones he hid. The ones that prove he cooked the books and framed my father to cover his own embezzlement. Adrian walked over to her. He placed a hand on her shoulder. You found it. It was on his server the whole time, Erin said. He kept it as a trophy. I just needed him to open the door so I could grab it. The pounding on the door stopped. The security guards outside had likely received new orders, or perhaps they had checked their phones and seen that the man paying them was currently losing $1 billion a minute. On the screen, the door to Vane's office burst open, but it wasn't his staff. It was federal agents. Marcus Vane, you are under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering, a voice on the feed announced. Vane looked at the camera one last time. His eyes met Erin's. There was no arrogance left, only fear. Then the feed cut to black. Silence returned to the office. The only sound was the heavy breathing of 3 people. Simon Halloway was still on the floor. He looked up at Adrian, his face pale. Adrian, I can explain. It was pressure. He threatened me. Adrian looked down at his former friend with cold detachment. You're fired, Simon, and I suggest you call a lawyer. You're going to need a very good one when the SEC sees your signature on that transfer attempt. Simon scrambled up and ran out the back exit, fleeing the ruins of his career. Erin sat back in the chair, her energy suddenly spent. She felt dizzy. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her exhausted. We did it, she whispered. Adrian turned to her. He didn't say a word. He just pulled her out of the chair and wrapped her in his arms. He held her tightly, burying his face in her neck. You saved me, he murmured against her skin. You saved everything. You gave me the chance, Erin replied, resting her head on his chest. I promised you double the salary, Adrian said, pulling back to look at her. But I think we need to renegotiate. Oh? Erin smiled weakly. Triple? I was thinking something more permanent. 3 months later, the obsidian room was just as dim and expensive as it had always been. The clatter of silverware and the murmur of business deals filled the air. Gareth, the manager, was scolding a new busboy near the kitchen doors. Faster! Table 6 needs water, and tuck in that shirt. The front door opened. Gareth turned, ready to assess the newcomer's wealth and assign a table accordingly. His jaw dropped. Walking in was Adrian Preece. He looked more relaxed than Gareth had ever seen him, wearing a casual blazer rather than a suit of armor. But it was the woman holding his hand that made Gareth choke on his breath. She wore a sleek navy dress that commanded attention. She carried herself with the grace of a queen. Erin, Gareth squeaked. Erin stopped and smiled at her old boss. Hello, Gareth. Is table 4 available? For you? Of course, anything. Gareth was sweating. He scrambled to grab menus. They sat at the same table where they had met, the same mahogany surface where Erin had scribbled on a receipt and changed history. It feels strange being on this side of the table, Erin admitted, unfolding her napkin. Get used to it, Adrian said, pouring her a glass of the 98 Bordeaux. To the new chief strategy officer of Preece Mercer Capital. They clinked glasses. How is your father? Adrian asked gently. Erin's face lit up. He's good. The release hearing was emotional. He's already complaining that the physics journals he missed in prison are derivative. But he's happy. He's living in the guest house for now. He asked if he could critique your risk models. Adrian laughed. I'd be honored, as long as he doesn't grade me too harshly. He reached across the table and took her hand. His thumb traced the line of her knuckles. You know, Adrian said, his voice lowering. I've been running the numbers. Oh no, Erin teased. More math. Always math. I've been calculating the probability of 2 people meeting the way we did. A waitress who was a secret genius and a billionaire who was looking for the one variable he couldn't buy. And what's the probability? Erin asked, leaning in. Statistically? Near 0, Adrian said. It's an anomaly. A miracle. I don't believe in miracles, Adrian. I believe in cause and effect. Then what was the cause? Erin squeezed his hand. You were hungry, and I was tired of being invisible. Adrian smiled. He reached into his jacket pocket. But this time, he didn't pull out a receipt or a calculator. He pulled out a small, velvet box. Erin's breath hitched. I have a new equation for you to solve, Adrian said, opening the box. Inside sat a diamond that caught the dim light, refracting it into 1,000 rainbows. It was simple, elegant, and perfect. Me plus you. What does that equal? Erin looked at the ring, then up at the man who had seen her when the rest of the world looked right through her. Infinity, she whispered, Adrian slid the ring onto her finger. That's the correct answer. As they kissed, the restaurant seemed to fade away. In the corner, a new waitress watched them with wide eyes, wondering who the lucky couple was. She adjusted her apron, picked up her tray, and went back to work, unaware that sometimes the most impossible fairy tales start with a dirty plate and a messy math problem. And that is the incredible story of Erin and Adrian. It just goes to show that you should never underestimate anyone based on their job title. Everyone has a story, and some people are hiding brilliance that can change the world. Erin went from counting tips to counting millions, not because she got lucky, but because she was prepared when the opportunity appeared. It makes you wonder, how many geniuses are walking past us every day in disguise? If you loved this story of justice, romance, and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you're the first to know when I upload the next drama. Also, check out the video on the screen right now. It's another story about a hidden identity that will blow your mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.